Hey everyone, I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about sports and how they influence attitudes more than you might think. So I'm going to start with a very non-academic book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but I think it provides a good framework for thinking about some of the attitudes I'm going to talk about. So in the book, Covey discusses an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset, where people with an abundance mindset think success isn't zero-sum, that everyone can succeed together, and people with a scarcity mindset think that success is a fixed pie, where if some people are doing better, others must naturally be doing worse. While this is not academic, a variety of subsequent books have examined these sorts of attitudes in different situations, especially among group attitudes, examining stuff in perceptions of race relations, where some people think that if another race faces less discrimination over time, that means their race must now be more discriminated against. Or considering in international relations, where there are mutually agreed upon trade agreements, but people think of them in terms of winners and losers, where there must be a winner and there must be a loser in the international space. And one of the challenges that this has brought up is trying to understand why. Why do some people view life as competitive, as a zero-sum game, and others don't? So most of the work answering this question has come from psychologists, where psychologists have identified that there is an overall propensity to view the world as competitive rather than cooperative. But I'm not a psychologist, and so I looked at this from a different perspective, which is, what if it's not a difference between the way people think, but it's actually the media that makes people think of the world as competitive rather than cooperative? And to examine this question, I ran an experiment. So in this experiment, I had 6 questions, 3 based on the psychological literature in terms of people thinking of groups as competitive, and 3 asking about specific areas where people see groups as competitive. So for example, in most situations, the interests of different groups are incompatible. That's a general question, versus when countries trade, one country wins and the other one loses. That's a more specific issue area question. But the experimental part was, before they answered these questions, they had to do a writing exercise, and they were assigned to write about one of 5 things. So some people were asked to write about their day. Some people were asked to write about a sad experience, some people a happy experience, some people a memorable sports loss, and some people a memorable sports victory. And the idea behind this is that 2 of the groups are thinking about competition, 2 of the groups are thinking about an emotional experience, but not thinking about competition, and 1 group isn't thinking about much at all. This is the results, and what it shows is that people where the y-axis is perceptions of how much groups compete against each other, and the x-axis is the different groups. So people who wrote about a happy experience or a sad experience were not statistically different from people who just wrote about their day. But people who wrote about sports, win or lose, thought that groups competed against each other more than those who just wrote about their day. In other words, thinking about competition, even if the competition has nothing to do with the questions I'm asking about, makes people think that the world is more competitive. And so at this point, I don't know, maybe you're thinking, well, this is interesting, but I don't think it applies to me. I don't really watch sports. You know, why does this matter? I think it matters a great deal, even if you don't watch sports. And that's because sports are hugely popular. So in 2005, of the top 100 television broadcasts in the United States, 14 of the top 100 were sports. In 2021, 94 out of the top 100 are sports. Sports are the last unifying cultural feature in America, which huge numbers of people watch in an increasingly divided media landscape. And this matters an enormous amount because this gives sports huge pull in shaping American culture, American society, and especially the American media. So a good example of this is the news. Outgoing CNN President Jeff Zucker explicitly said that politics are sports, and he wanted CNN to be more like ESPN because ESPN had such good ratings and so many people were watching sports. He thought it was more exciting and more engaging to present politics as a competition. This has been criticized in the past for being not particularly informative, but I think the problem is deeper. When you see all sorts of these headlines, when every news event is treated through the framework of who won and who lost, my research suggests that that makes people see the world as a competition. Even more starkly is when a situation actually is competitive. For example, here is the poster for the first presidential debate. If you see this, you are not going to go into the debate expecting a high-minded discussion of ideas. You are expecting a fight. And this will make you think in terms of your team, rooting for your team and viewing this as a very zero-sum game. This is entirely deliberate as well, as this poster is modeled after UFC posters, making the fight comparisons even more explicit. Ultimately, this is critical because when people fail to see situations that are potentially cooperative and they see them instead as competitive, that has a number of negative outcomes. First of all, they might just miss opportunities for cooperation, assuming there can be no cooperation with whatever the other group is. And second, and potentially even worse, if they see the situation as zero-sum, they might want another group to suffer or struggle because that makes them think that their own group is doing better. Even if they're in a situation where the other group suffering provides no benefit to themselves, in a competitive situation, you want to see the other team lose, even if your own team isn't winning. Ultimately, that leads to disastrous, dysfunctional politics, and a world where everything is treated like sports, where sports are the big money maker, where that's the exciting way to view the world, leads to a world that is full of competition, full of fireworks, very exciting, and also, I think, as we've seen, incredibly dysfunctional. So thanks so much, and yeah, honored to be part of this competition.